Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Landis, we're flying high. How good is North football, dude?
It's really good, and I'm happy to part of me was, I don't know if nervous is the right word, but like I wanted the Oregon Washington game to live up to the hype, and it more than delivered. So yeah, we're feeling really good about Northern football.
I, I thought going into the Washington Oregon game, which we previewed extensively last week, and guess what? We're going to preview extensively the Ohio State Penn State game on this episode of Kings of the North. If you had trepidation about, I don't know, like Washington, are they kind of a one-trick pony? I I I think they are kind of a one-trick pony, but the trick is so good.
Yeah.
It's the best pony you ever saw. So I came away, I think, more convinced that Washington is actually a very legit national title contender, and I don't think Oregon's far behind.
No, I think they're both very good. I think we'll get into it, I guess, a little bit, but I am of the belief that they'll play again. We'll discuss that more in a few minutes here. But yeah, I was probably I was impressed with Washington because I thought they were a one trick pony. I wasn't quite sold on the ability to win games like that when there's really only one way to win if you're Washington. But they did it. They found a way. Like, it wasn't a perfect day for Michael Penix, but they won because of their ability to be explosive, which is like, it's fine. If you can do that against Oregon, I think you can do it against anybody.
It'll be a very different game, but if we get a version of Ohio State Penn State that is as competitive and high level as Washington Oregon, I think everybody in the North will be very happy. We appreciate you guys joining us here. We do this every Monday early in the week. We run through the best, most interesting things in Northern football. We start with the Frantic 14. That's 7 topics, 2 minutes each. Then we're going to talk about the best teams in the North and talk about what are the best regular season wins for all the best teams in the North in the playoff era. And there's a particular reason we're doing that. We'll go behind enemy lines, talk about the best teams in the South, compare them to the best teams in the North. The South might not like that. Do best players, of course, the Brian Ferentz Survivor Show. I have a special edition of that this week that might just inspire you. We've been going for chuckles. I think now we're going for chills. Then we'll do the look ahead, best games, and then we'll dig in on Ohio State, Penn State at the end. But first up, the Frantic 14, Bill Landis and Doug Lesmerises. Here we go. Number 1, could Air Force win the Big Ten West, Landis? We are grabbing the Air Force Falcons. We talk about the 28 teams in the North. Those are Power 5 teams. Air Force in the Mountain West is not one of those teams, but we're grabbing them because they're so good and so interesting. A 34-27 win over Wyoming last week. They're 6-0. They're number 22 in the AP poll. And are they better than Iowa, Minnesota, Nebraska, Northwestern, Wisconsin, everybody in the West? What do you think?
I'd like their chances to win
Yeah.
because like the thing, like, so they're just an absolute machine running the football. They're the best rushing team in the country, and they run it a lot, and yet they're still like top 10 in rushing average. They're number one in touchdowns, they're number one in yards, they're number one in yards per game. But they also lead the country in passing efficiency, which is kind of weird. They've only thrown it 28 times this year, but like their ability to throw it when they need to, they're devastating rushing attack. And oh, by the way, they're pretty good on defense. They're number 13 in the country in defensive yards per play, and they haven't been top 20 nationally in that stat since 2009. So this is like a very good version of an Air Force defense. They've had some abysmal defenses over the years, while they've still been like a pretty good program. Yes, I think they could and would win the Big Ten West this year.
Here's a comparison point. Air Force beat Utah State, let's see, 39-21, I think. They outgained them 428 to 302. Iowa, who's leading the Big Ten West, beat Utah State 24-14 in a game that Utah State actually outgained Iowa. The bottom line is Air Force beat Utah State worse than Iowa beat Utah State. Another reason for us to claim these guys, and if we were fully rolling on Kings of the North like we're going to be next year, we'd have this guy on the show. Zach Larrier, their quarterback, ran for 111 yards last week. It was a career high for him. He's from Ohio. Both his parents are from Ohio. He went to high school in California. I couldn't completely get his whole story. His dad passed away of a heart condition when Zach was 3. He's been at Air Force. I think this is his 5th year. He waited his turn, and he is leading this offense, brother. Like, what a great story. It's an Ohio kid. You go to his bio, Youngstown.
Yeah.
Like, we're all about this guy. This should be America's team. They have a shot to be a very good shot to make a New Year's Six bowl as the Group of 5 representative. I don't know who's going to beat them. They won this Wyoming game. It was a barn burner. John Lee Eldridge, the third 58-yard touchdown run. in the final 2.5 minutes. And this is like a historic program. Again, one piece of trivia. This might be the best service academy team in 60 years, by the way. Like, this is how good this is. In 1985, they finished in the top 10. Air Force did. They were really good. Like, they lost to BYU by a touchdown. If they had beaten BYU, they might have had a backdoor shot at a national title game appearance. Troy Calhoun is in year 17 as the Air Force head coach. Fisher DeBerry was there for 23 years before him. When the program started, Ben Martin coached it for 28 years. They've only had 3 other coaches besides those 3 guys who were there for 2 decades. Do you know who coached Air Force for 1 year? In
Uh,
1978, a super famous football coach was the 1-year head coach of Air Force. We're now
Lee
doing Air Force
Corso.
trivia. What?
Lee Corso.
Really good. Bill Parcells.
Really?
How crazy is that?
That is
He was the
crazy.
head coach at Air Force in 1978. So anyway, this is a historic program that has continuity and has had peaks in the past and is peaking right now. We want to make you aware of how good Air Force is. Get on board, man. Get on board with these guys. It's fun to watch them, and they might have it. You might be seeing them against a top 10 team in a bowl game later on. We want to give props to Air Force because they're in the North, baby. All right, number 2, we got teams in trouble, and we're going to run through 4 teams in trouble, Landis, and I'm going to ask you, are they okay?
Mhm.
And you can take that however you want to take it. And, you're the final arbiter here. I'm just
Yeah.
the guy with the notebook. First off is Syracuse. They've lost 3 straight games. They got blown out by Florida State after previously getting blown out by Clemson and North Carolina. They've been outscored 112-24 in their last 3 games. They're now 4-3 after last year they started 6-0 and lost 5 straight. This year they started 4-0 and lost 3 straight. Are they okay?
No, I don't think so. It seems like their method or their way of winning is Garrett Schrader needs to run for 200 yards or else they can't win or else they can't beat good teams, I guess, to be more specific. So like does anyone expect them to win these games? I guess not as they're currently constructed and how the opponents are constructed. But I do think Syracuse should be a more competitive football program than it is against the best teams in the ACCs. And I don't see that really changing given the track record last year and now this year. So I think they're in a little bit of a rough spot.
Okay, Washington State started 4-0, lost to UCLA 25-17, then last week got blown out by Arizona. Arizona's been a problem for a lot of teams, but
Mhm.
not like this. 44-6, Arizona wins. Cam Ward in that game was their great starting quarterback, who we were all about after he beat Oregon State, was 22 of 30 for 192. In the Oregon State game, for example, he was 28 of 34 for 404. In the first 4 games, their first 4 wins, his average yards per attempt was 9.8. The last 2 games, the 2 losses, it's 5.6. I don't know if people have figured out how to stop that offense. Is Washington State okay?
Uh, I think they're still dangerous, right? Jake Dickert after the game was talking about we have to run the ball better. They have 47 total rushing yards in their last 2 games against Arizona and UCLA. And I guess when you are that one dimensional, the margin for error is incredibly thin. And it seemed like that Washington State found the wrong side of that in this game. But it was also too what I said about last week when we were talking about the flaws of the best teams in the North. Like this team does not value the football; they turn it over way too much. So as long as they keep doing that, like I don't think I can say they're okay. But with Cam Ward and those receivers, like I do think they're a team you have to take seriously week after week. So there's some things to figure out there. Like they got to be better on defense. They got to be more balanced on offense. I think long term for that program to sustain. But this year in particular, um I still would be on alert if I see them go off my schedule because of how deadly that passing attack can be.
But it feels like they're much more a spoiler than a contender
Yes,
in the
for sure.
Pac-12.
Yep.
All right, Colorado blew a 29-0 halftime lead to Stanford. Colorado is now 4-3, and they're trying to make a bowl game, and you don't know if they're going to do it. They have UCLA, Oregon State, Arizona, Washington State, and Utah left. Is Colorado okay?
I don't think they're okay this year if we're talking about getting to a bowl game because like they had to win this game, and now if you look at the remainder of their games, like the Arizona game was the other one where you think like, oh, I think they can get that. Now Arizona's playing really well. I really don't see a world where they can beat UCLA, Oregon State, Washington State, or Utah. Maybe they can beat Washington State. I don't know, but um, it's tougher now. Like, and it would have been a really good story, I think, for Colorado to make a bowl game. I'm less bullish on that idea. There's some like game management stuff there that I'm questioning. Like one, their overtime strategy of taking the ball first, I think is wrong. They
Yeah.
did that against Stanford and they ended up losing. And also, like Travis Hunter comes back from, was it like a lacerated liver? Is that what he had? Is that why he
Kidney, I think, but
kidney?
yeah.
Lacerated
Last
anything
that's
is
yeah.
is serious. And he like played the entire game and he got absolutely torched on defense. And like obviously they need him to play. There are talent deficiencies up and down that roster. They still have a good quarterback, they still have good receivers, they don't have much of anything else. So I'm not surprised to see, like, I guess the chickens come home to roost a little bit on their roster construction, but I also think they can manage it better. So like long term, I still believe in what Dion's doing there, but this year I think can get away from them.
All right, last one is West Virginia. They lost on Thursday night on a Hail Mary to their old coach, Dana Holgerson, who left West Virginia to go to Houston several years ago. They had fought back. West Virginia was down 35-24. They fight back. They get a 50-yard touchdown pass with 12 seconds to play on a 4th and 10. It is like, it's awesome. And then they lose on a Hail Mary in part because the quarterback, Garrett Green, who threw the touchdown pass, took off his helmet in a
Yeah.
celebration, got a 15-yard penalty, and made the Hail Mary easier. This was a team that we've talked about Neil Brown maybe saving his job with those 4 straight wins after the Penn State loss to open. I follow some West Virginia people on the social medias, man. There was a lot of frustration. They gave up a 100-yard kickoff return in this game, and that they blow it on a Hail Mary. It felt like a bubbling over point. I don't know. Is West Virginia and specifically Neil Brown, are they okay?
Less okay than I would have said a week ago, right? We thought he was doing stuff to save that job, but they've been like living on the razor's edge the entire year. Like I said, like I don't know why they were favored going into this game because they've not played like a team who should be favored on the road against anybody with a pulse. Like they've won games probably that they shouldn't have, but credit to them for doing it. But, like, if you told me they were gonna lose the rest of their games, I would say, "Yeah, okay, that makes sense." If you told me they could win a few of them, like, "Yeah, that makes sense too." They've just been that kinda team this year, but to lose a game like this in this fashion, like, I'm a little worried about it now, spiraling on them, spiraling on Neil Brown. They gotta play Oklahoma State this week. Oklahoma State seems to have stuff figured out, like, UCF, BYU, Oklahoma, Cincinnati, Baylor can certainly all beat this West Virginia team. So, um, it's precarious, like, it could definitely get away from them, and I think if it does, then Neil Brown is firmly back on the hot seat.
All right. That was long. We'll go a little bit faster now, starting with number 3, Rutgers. Rutgers is down 24-6 entering in the fourth quarter against Michigan State. By all the accounts of the people there covering the game, maybe 3,000 fans left in the stands. Bad weather. It's raining on them. Their team is down, and Rutgers comes back to win. Greg Schiano looks like the happiest coach in America on the sideline. This is a great quote from Johnny Langdon from Rutgers that was passed along by Steve Politi, the columnist out there, about everybody leaving. Respect is earned. I think we earned some respect today. In the future, maybe they'll stick around a little longer. It's like a great approach to that. Everything that you saw from the Rutgers players was praising the people who did stay, not ripping the people who left. But by the way, this team is 5-0 at home this year, 5-2 on the season. How you feeling about the Scarlet Knights, man?
I feel good about the Scarlet Knights. They have 2 home games left against Ohio State and Maryland. So, like, the Ohio State one, maybe not the party they're gonna want it to be, but I hope they have a packed house for when they play Maryland at the end of the year and cap off what I think will be a bowl season for Rutgers. Their defense is tremendous. They cannot throw the football, but Kyle Monangai, man, like that, I think Kyle Monangai, their running back, is like quietly one of the better running backs in the North and perhaps the country at 146 yards in this game, including the game winning touchdown. Like statistically, he stacks up pretty well. And this is a program that's like had some sneaky good running backs in the past, like Isaiah Pacheco, right? Who's now doing stuff for the Kansas City Chiefs at a pretty high level. So like I'd pay attention to him. I'd pay attention to Rutgers because I do think they are they are close to maximizing, I think, what they can be in the Big Ten.
One of the main goals of the show is to help fans in the North love their team. And I've made a lot of fun of Rutgers over the years. I still don't know if long term for that program, if the Big Ten was the right move for them. But I think this could be a line in the sand. Like, awesome. If that's the idea, if these players are invigorated by this win, if the fan base says, hey, man, we're going to believe in these guys, like that's a wonderful thing for a group of fans that haven't had a ton to cheer about in the Big Ten. And you thought Greg Schiano might get it done. They do it a very specific way. They're trying to be the Iowa of the East Coast and win with defense. But Gavin Wimsatt as a quarterback who's going to end up being like a 4-year starter there, that was a plan to bring in a young guy and play him. I'm very happy for those fans and for those players. And I think the idea of like earning trust and earning faith, awesome.
Mhm.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So congrats to Rutgers on that huge win. All right. Number 4, Utah played a safety at running back and he ran for 158 yards, and it's just Utah being Utah. Sione Vaki, he he's second on the team in defensive snaps for Utah this year. It's not like some backup guy. They're like, hey, you're not. He plays every snap at safety. They played him 20 snaps at running back against Cal. He ran 15 times for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns. It's an unbelievable individual effort. But for a Utah team that has not had its starting quarterback all year, has not had its most talented skill player in its starting tight end all year, now has 2 injuries at running back, 2 freshmen at running back, and decided, man, we got to play a safety here. Kyle Whittingham continues to get it done, but props to Sione Vaki for playing both ways.
It's crazy, and I think it's like quintessential Utah that they they have figured this out. They tried him once as like a wildcat quarterback in their last game before the bye week, and then they just like made him the feature back in this game, which is kind of insane, but it's awesome. That's what's one of the things that I love about college football is that it can be so unpredictable. Well, so I think they're still fairly limited on offense. Like they play USC. I think they can give USC a game. I'm less bullish on the idea of them beating Oregon and Washington, given the way they're currently constructed on offense. But see what Notre Dame did to USC over the weekend. I think Utah can do a similar thing.
Yeah, so it's the 2-time defending Pac-12 champ, and they're going to play all the big boys. I think they are going to play a role in the Pac-12 race. I don't know if that means they're going to win the Pac-12, but I think they might get somebody. It might be USC this week, or it might be Oregon or Washington down the line. I think they can help determine who does make the Pac-12 title game because they're so tough and they're so smart and they're so well coached. And this was a great example of it. All right, number 5, Wisconsin lost to Iowa. Maryland lost to Illinois. And my question is, who is going forward going to be the 4th best program of the current Big Ten teams as USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington come in next year? If we've established that Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State are at the top, this just was an example of, a lot of times you would take it as, hey, it's a tough, deep league. But I think Wisconsin and Maryland were 2 teams that, people were kind of pointing toward is like, hey, maybe Maryland will make another step this year. Wisconsin year 1 over under Luke Fickell. I don't know. Let me give you a stat. In the playoff era, 9 years of the 14 playoff, I did finishing in the top 4 of the Big Ten teams at the end of the year in the AP rankings. There were 2 years where there were only 3 teams ranked. So then I only did 3. But otherwise, I did the top 4. Here's who finished in the top 4 by program in the last 9 years. Ohio State, 9 out of 9 in the top 4. Penn State and Michigan, 5. Michigan State and Wisconsin, 4. Iowa, 3. Northwestern, 2. And Minnesota and Indiana, 1. It's more varied maybe than you would think. And we have to remember that like Michigan and Penn State haven't always been there. They've been there like half the time in this era, but not constantly. Maybe I shouldn't even be thinking about it. Maybe the answer is it's going to be somebody different every year. But I thought like this was a tough loss for Maryland. Illinois was looking
Mhm.
very vulnerable. Maryland comes into Ohio State 2 weeks ago, all excited. And then they follow an Ohio State loss with another loss. I don't know. Do they need a 4th team to be good, or is it just going to be rotating and that's the way it is? Or what do you make of this?
I mean, I don't think that I consider Maryland in those terms. I do. I think Wisconsin could potentially be that team, right? Like Luke Fickell being there and like the tradition of that program. I expect them to have a good defense more often than not. Their defense this year is pretty good. I think there's a higher level of defensive play we've seen from that program that they can still get to. But this is a fairly good Wisconsin defense. They just got to figure out quarterback. Like I think they have the right idea with what they want to do with the offense in general. The thing that I'm fearful of, I guess, with Wisconsin is them sort of hopping on the transfer quarterback merry-go-round and picking a different guy out of the portal every year to try to solve their problems. I think they have to recruit high school quarterbacks and find a guy there and develop them. Otherwise, I think they're going to have too many dips to be the consistently 4th best program, as I'm saying. Um, but if they can figure that out, then I have faith in them getting there. Less so Maryland. I think Maryland's going to have some ebbs and flows, just sort of the nature of their program and that university. I just don't think you can consistently be a team that's winning 8, 9 games every year.
We had talked last week about the idea of, I think, like Kirk Ferentz was skeptical of this Wisconsin offensive shift, and this was going to be a head-to-head battle. Iowa threw it 14 times in that win. Wisconsin threw it 50 times in the loss.
Yeah.
Now, their starting quarterback got hurt. Tanner Mordecai went out during that game, and that certainly affected them. But Iowa was already on his backup quarterback because their starter already is out for the year. So just a weird situation. One of the things I do think is the Big Ten does miss Michigan State being competitive like that.
Mhm.
We can't forget, I think, how important a program Michigan State has been in the last 15 years in the Big Ten. And when they're a mess, I think the conference feels it a little bit. All right, time to plant some flags. Number 6, I'm going to plant my flag on this. I'm saying Oregon State's going to make the Pac-12 title game. I actually put a bet on this before the season started, partly because of schedule, partly because I believed in Oregon State. I think it was another good win this past week against UCLA, right? You weren't as impressed 2 weeks ago against Cal. They don't play USC, but when I look at the conference standings right now for the Pac-12, USC is coming off a Notre Dame loss. They're still undefeated, though, in the Pac-12. So USC's 4-0, Washington's 3-0, Oregon State is 3-1, and then Oregon and Utah are 2-1. I just think USC is going to lose multiple games. I get down to a point, Landis, where I think Washington's going to make the Pac-12 title game at either 9-0 or 8-1. And then the way I calculate it, I have USC and Utah both finishing 6-3 in the Pac-12, and I have Oregon and Oregon State playing their rivalry game on the last game of the season, both at 6-2 in the Pac-12, and the winner makes the Pac-12 title game. And I think Oregon State can win that game. So I'm in on Oregon State, and you are less so.
You have Oregon losing again before that game?
Yeah, I have somebody getting them. Maybe Utah. Like I have somebody
Hmm.
getting them their short passing game. Like I've just been I'm not out on Oregon by any means, but in a world where they have to play USC, they have to play Utah, they have to play Washington State. I just think maybe somebody gets them.
I feel like you're a little bit of an Oregon hater. I feel
I feel like I am too. I
yeah.
don't know if it's on purpose. I don't know what happened exactly. I mean, they played very well. I get Dan Lanning being aggressive in those situations. Um, I don't know. I like how Washington goes about it better.
Yeah.
And I still think Washington is just more dangerous. I just think the path for Oregon's a little more narrow. And so it's not that I don't believe in them, but that's how I see it. I see Oregon playing for a Pac-12 title game spot, which would be awesome if we got to that point. And I just like the cut of Oregon State's jib.
I put a bet on Oregon State before the year to win the Pac-12, so I would be okay with this happening. But I've also come around on it's Washington and Oregon, and then a step down to everybody
Okay.
else. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Plant your flag then.
I'm gonna make this relatively short. I think I want to read a quote. This is from BYU head coach Kalani Sitake after BYU lost 44-11 to a TCU team that was playing its backup quarterback. Kalani Sitake said, "Sometimes you have to pivot and figure out other ways to do things. You just can't keep doing the same things and expect the results to change. We definitely have to pivot and do some things, but they are all within the realm of our capabilities. We have the players and the talent to do it." I think BYU has been hit with a big old dose reality of what life in the Big 12 is going to be like. And like the Big 12 is changing. Texas and Oklahoma are leaving the conference. I still think it's going to be a really good conference. You have Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado coming in. Like those are teams that I think can attract talent at a fairly good clip. Colorado, especially. This is a deep league. This is a league that I think BYU is not used to seeing teams with as much or more talent than them week after week after week after week. And I'm a little worried about their long term future, I guess, remaining competitive in the Big 12. I don't think they're going to fall off the face of the earth. I still think it's a proud program. It's a physical program that maybe just having a little bit of a down year, but they also expect to win, and I think win a lot. They've only had 4 losing seasons since 2000. I think they are in danger of having a losing season this year. And if the head coach is expressing some doubts and some concerns about being able to stay competitive or be competitive in the Big 12, then I'm going to grab onto those two and just put it out into the world that I'm a little worried about where they are at the moment.
I think like hey, Big 12, like, sorry about that. We didn't mean it. We're at have BYU, Boise, Oregon State, Washington State as the Big Four in the Mountain West, like banging heads against each other
Be great.
to go to take that, take a playoff spot every year. I'm here for something like that in a huge way. So, all right, the Frantic 14 was more like the Frantic 24 this week.
Hmm.
We wanted to hit a lot of teams. Time to dig in on the best teams and the best players. We'll do that next on Kings of the North.